It's been nearly 2 months since that fateful day, when mysteriously the entire power grid across North America suddenly collapsed. Speculation has run rampant, especially in the camps. Some say it was an EMP from an attack by a foreign adversary. Some say it was a CME from the sun, a giant coronal mass ejection. Others think it's the planet Nibiru, but one thing that everybody agrees on: they sure would like a hot shower about now. And they are really sick of reconstituted beans and rice and potatoes. But people are starting to crack. The reports are starting to come in. All of a sudden, there's absolutely no morality left in man anywhere, because they're beginning to realize something: that none of it matters. Without law and order, without civilized society, we are back to law of the jungle. Now, we're going to continue that story over at Patreon and talk about it in a way that might disturb some folks. But that will be the ultimate reality of a grid down, power down, shit is the fan situation. Morality will go out the door. If you'd like to join us over there, it's $1 per month. That's it. One. Even less if you sign up for an entire year. Fully refundable, up to 90 days. Some people will walk around talking about the Founding Fathers and how we were now in the same position. We can rebuild things the right way. And they'll talk about this idea of inalienable rights from God. One of which being the pursuit of happiness. Personal happiness. Happiness as defined by the person at the time. You see, with no 911, things that were criminal before, now, well, not really. Because criminal is only what they catch you with, right? If you don't get caught, it's not a crime. And without the internet, and without telephones and cell phones and texting and social media, there's no way to publicly shame anybody. There's no cancel culture. One of the funny things about the Founding Fathers is that in modern society, by our definition of morality, every single one of them would have been in prison, and none of them would have qualified for public service. What are you talking about, McKee? Absolutely not. You see, in their era, the age of consent was between 10 and 12 years old. Women were property. Many of these men were raging alcoholics. And they owned people. They owned slaves. So by our modern standard of decency and righteousness and morality and even law, none of them would have qualified. Yet we look at things like freedom of speech, Second Amendment, the protections against unlawful searches and seizures, to be secure in one's persons and papers. All these great ideas from men who were so fundamentally personally flawed, according to us. You see, in that scenario we talked about before, there are going to be a lot of people getting their buttons pushed because they're just going to have been pushed to the edge. They're going to say, you know what? It doesn't really matter anymore, does it? We are in a near state of anarchy, and people are doing whatever they will. But isn't that what this says, though? Wouldn't the pursuit of happiness as a right guaranteed by God be doing whatever you want to, as long as it didn't harm another? As long as it didn't directly harm another. You see, they not only defined these rights, they defined who had them. All men. And at that time, white male landowners. They didn't consider women people. They didn't give them the right to vote. They were property. Same thing with anyone who wasn't a white male landowner. Besides, most people at this time, they couldn't read. They couldn't read. How could you guarantee a right? How could you hand them a Declaration of Independence or a Constitution and have them understand it if they couldn't even read it? How could they assess their own rights? See, this is the real story of grid down, shit hits the fan, end of the world scenarios. There are going to be a lot of people get their buttons pushed, and nothing will be immoral. Nothing at all will be immoral. And people will get together in groups, and they'll start pointing fingers, and they'll start going after smaller groups that they don't agree with. It's vendetta time. It's payback time. It's going to be our way because it's the mob time in North America. And they'll have their own version of this when they find people that they can publicly say now are persona non grata. They can sew the little red A onto them. They're going to do it. And there's not going to be any day in court, any rights. They're just going to do it. And there are going to be people clamoring to get into FEMA camps, to be safe, to be protected, even if the power is limited, just to have a little tiny taste of the way life used to be. Maybe 1 or 2 rooms have air conditioners. Maybe they have meat. No, that's dreaming. That's dreaming. These people would be fine with a little bowl of applesauce. Just a treat like that. See, in yesterday's video, we talked about these old folks down in the villages and this paradigm they have, these key parties, where they get together and to spice things up a little bit, they engage in activity that doesn't harm a soul. That does not harm a single soul who doesn't choose to engage in it or be part of it. It's entirely up to them. But boy, I tell you what, go look at the comment sections of the last couple of videos. That shouldn't be allowed. That's horribly immoral. But if it's their pursuit of happiness, is it not guaranteed by God as a right? And if that's the case, how can it be immoral? I know that seemed very convoluted. Let me say this again. If it is a right, according to the Declaration of Independence, an inalienable right, endowed by their Creator, us, we endowed, the pursuit of happiness, and that's what makes them happy. They're pursuing happiness, they're achieving happiness, and they have a right endowed by God to pursue said happiness. How can it possibly be immoral? You would have to say that they no longer have the right to do that because someone else believes it's wrong. Or someone should make a law that they can't do that. Or someone should publicly shame them if they do. How can that be the case when you have a right to the pursuit of happiness? I know a lot of people would rather hear about taste testing dried beans or rice, or maybe a video of somebody cleaning a ballistic weapon, or some new little survival tool, or even Antarctica. But this is the real story. This is going to be the real threat. If you're going to prep, if you're going to be a prepper, if you're going to get ready for what's coming, you want to be out there on the bleeding edge, this is what you're going to have to accept. That things are going to change. And the accepted standards of morality you can forget about. If anybody wants to find the history of laws of consent, just type in ages of consent to Wikipedia. They cite all of their sources, by the way. Those of you who think that this is always wrong because it's Wikipedia, you see these little numbers, 105, 106, all these sources, they cite their sources. While the unrestricted age of consent is between 16 and 18 in all U.S. states, the laws have widely varied across the country in the past. In as late as 1880, which is 20 years after the War of Northern Aggression, some people know it as the Civil War, 20 years after that war, the ages of consent were set at 10 or 12 in most states, with the exception of Delaware, where it was 7. And they raised the age of consent not because of somebody's discomfort with the baby-making activity. By 1920, 26 states had an age of consent at 16. 21 states had an age of consent at 18. One state was 14. The only reason they raised those ages of consent was the Industrial Revolution. They were trying to combat child labor. They didn't care about the baby making. Not in the least. It was irrelevant. In fact, many places still at that time, if you were 14 or 15 and you hadn't had at least one kid, you were in the minority. Age of consent laws historically only applied where a female was younger than her male partner. By 2015, ages of consent were gender independent. Until the late 20th century, many states, you ready for this? Until the late 20th century, many states had provisions requiring that the teenage girl must be of chaste character in order for the sexual conduct to be considered criminal. It was only 1998 where Mississippi became the last state to remove the chastity provision from the code. So none of the laws that even existed after 1920 would apply if the girl could be proven to be, well, accommodating. And you can look this up. So once again, when there's no 911 and you can't call anybody where they can come fix your problems, and there's no internet where you can go put somebody on blast, and you can go engage in cancel culture and ruin somebody's reputation, when you can't do that anymore, and that doesn't exist, and people are miserable, and they're tired, and they're hungry, and they're either cold or hot, they smell bad, they haven't had a good meal, they haven't bathed, you watch. It ain't going to be about what you've stored up. It truly isn't. There's going to be pitchfork mobs. There's going to be little cliques, little fiefdoms, and they're going to create their own little world of laws. And those laws will be what they say they are day to day, much like the king, which will be very ironic that that will be the eventuality when the authorities go away. Many people have dreamed of this day. Oh, I can't wait till all this happens and there's no more authorities. There will be power brokers. And they're going to act like kings, dictators, and barons. And they're going to have people supporting them. Because that's all it takes. That's what these men were labeled as. Revolutionaries taking off to this brand new land and creating this ridiculous idea of a Congress and a land without kings ruled by the people and the will of the mob, which is basically what democracy was. Oh, they call it a republic for sure, but when the mob decides that the republic is no longer that important, and they say the will of the people, the will of the people, the will of the people will stand. De facto, if not in law. Just like we see down in the villages. See, down there they have a rule. Down there they have a way of doing things that most people think is really, really, that's seedy. Boy, I can't imagine just a random set of keys. For them, though, that's their Declaration of Independence confirmed, inalienable right given to them by God to pursue happiness. Whatever makes them happy. High five. Can't wait, hon. See, this is the crazy part that a lot of people don't want to talk about. It's up to them, isn't it? What makes them happy, just like it's up to you. We'll leave it there. God bless. Join us over at Patreon. We'll talk more about this in a way that is probably a little bit more illuminating. $1 per month, that's it. Love to have you. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.